Bitcoin finished May in the green, up 11%. So what does that mean for Bitcoin in June and for the rest of the cycle? The data in today's video might shock you, but I guarantee you will find something that you absolutely love. We've got a massive video to get into with the data covering Bitcoin across the timeframes, the price scales, market sentiment, news, theories, cycles, Elliott wave, lots to get through for Bitcoin. As I see it, there has been 5 key events, and it seems like we're in that 6th key event. This is basically looking at the theory for the Bitcoin cycle. The first was the capitulation. This was in 2022. So I'm going to run through this relatively quickly because it's, again, just a review so we can get all up to date. Markets capitulated, cryptos capitulated, May and June. Market went quiet. Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies went quiet. And then we had the next event, and that was the FTX collapse. From that point, even from June, I was thinking that this was around the lows based on what I'd seen with the price, time, type of events that had occurred. But in terms of time, it seemed like it needed a little bit longer. I had no way of knowing that the market would go lower, that it would hit 15K, but that's what happened. And so we got out of that cycle low, and the conditions really did change from early 2023. But we do note that the majority were looking for a recession at that time. Things were going to collapse. On to event number 3, and this was the banking crisis in March 2023. The market showed us that it was a non-event. It was a non-crisis. It was a nothing burger because it pumped and closed higher. This is where I got very, very bullish, basically at this March low, and we saw the breakout. So this led to that next period of time where we had this huge consolidation of about 7 months before we got to event number 4, where October broke out. So this is where things really started to kick off, and a little bit of the public interest got involved into that ETF top in January, which then led to February, where I see another event occur there where we basically broke out of the 40 and 50K regions, got very, very, one of the biggest bars that we had seen, and then we got to that peak in March. So that's basically where the extreme greed really kicked off, and then we got into that peak of March. Now we're into our, I think it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th turning point. And this could be the period where the market consolidates again before another big breakout. Is it going to happen in June? Is it going to happen in July, August, September? We will have to wait and see. And there's a little bit of data to suggest what could be happening over this nearly second half of 2024. But I think we're now into this next event, which we'll look back on in the months ahead as we lead into the end of the cycle and think, why didn't we see this any more clearer at the time? So this is a quick look at the 18.6-year real estate and economic cycle. Note, I didn't say stock market cycle, just real estate and economic cycle. We're somewhere around here now. There's a few little movements up from that point, but we're basically in this final stage. So wherever we are, you want to call it here, you want to call it there, whatever, somewhere at this earlier stage of this final move into the top, which then leads to the biggest correction that we would have seen in the last roughly 20 years, the longest and potentially the largest as well. The longest correction we've seen since 2009 has been about 10 months. We really haven't seen anything too much longer than that, than what we saw in 2022. And I think that next collapse is going to be the big one, which could affect Bitcoin, and Bitcoin hitting another all-time high after the current all-time high that we have been in. But we got some time to get there. Essentially, this theory is still on. 18.6-year cycle is still well and truly heading up, and that I think is going to drag Bitcoin and cryptos along with it. The headlines are still all roughly the same. ETFs are still here. Positive news. Bitcoin price hasn't really changed. It's been pretty boring for the majority of people, just sitting around 67, 69K. But as I pointed out with the average true range of the chart in the last couple of videos, I think we are building towards a big move out of this current range between this sort of 56 and 74K level. Eventually there'll be a big move, even if and the big move I think is to the upside. So I think that's probably an important one to note as well. Most people are sort of wondering, is it going to be up or down? I think eventually we're going to see an up. And in terms of the ETF flows, well, they've been positive, but barely anything at all. And I wouldn't blame them because essentially the market's been pretty dead and boring. It's just been ranging now between 64 and sort of $70,000. So not much has really gone on. So that's a quick look at what's going on in the macro space. The news headlines are still good. ETFs are still there. Nothing has really changed. And also the price of Bitcoin hasn't really changed. As for the US dollar, we have seen a correction on this. And while it was taking a step back, while the US dollar was going up, as I said here, US dollar up, asset prices generally go down or pause. We did see a bit of heat come out of the stock market, and we saw some corrections, and then of course move up again, and then another correction. But the Bitcoin price had been holding up relatively well, which, as we've seen in the past, if you're getting pressure from the US dollar, yet your asset has been holding up and not capitulating against a strong US dollar, eventually the probabilities have shown that it turns into more of a bullish move. So I think there's some underlying bullishness here where we've seen the US dollar rise, but Bitcoin has remained in a trading range above sort of 56,000, more around that sort of $60,000 to $70,000 level. So eventually, when this breaks down, as is part of our real estate cycle theory in the second half of the real estate cycle, so right here, the US dollar typically breaks down. It takes time. Remember, it's going to take many months. Once it starts to break down, that might show more bullishness for Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies as well. We've done about 180% from that October breakout, and that's really where we saw the market sentiment change. That was the first change there, the October break. And we had a lot to do with the Wyckoff analysis here, where I was looking at the accumulation occur and then the breakout. And essentially, that's what's happened. Most people were looking for a redistribution here and then a collapse. But of course, that didn't happen and we got the breakout. So 180% from that first initial market sentiment change. Then we got really ridiculous at the tops here. And of course, we had to have that cool off over the last couple of months. Now, this is the left and right translated cycle. Remember at the peak here, maybe you were here in March, maybe you weren't. If you weren't, this is really, really important to note. Because of how strong everything got, how ridiculous the prices went, people thought that this was going to be the end of the cycle. They thought we were going to have a left translated cycle. And what that means is that typically we got just over 2 years up, so sometimes 3 years, often 3 years, and then a 1 year down. And that brings on the 4-year cycle, not the halving cycle. Forget this halving thing. The halving cycle, put it aside. 4 years, low to low, okay? And so as we got this really big, strong run up, they all thought we were going into a left cycle and that there was going to be a long period of decline. Now, although that could still happen, so that's still a possibility. We haven't broken out to new highs. It doesn't seem likely at the moment while the price remains above the low at 56, or worst case scenario, above the monthly swing top and then the other swing top of the ETF, which is about $48,000. Okay. So while we're up here, it doesn't seem likely that we're going to get a breakdown. The same thing happened in the last cycle where there was a fast 6 months up. A lot thought that we're going into a left translated cycle and then basically just flatten out for 3 years or 3.5 years before we went on this next bull market. And that didn't happen again. So this leads me to the other point I was mentioning in the intro about this stop start theory. So we had the market basically take off and it stopped in April at the peak and basically went dead for about 7 months. And then we started again while no one was watching. Things took off. A lot of people kept trying to short this on the way up and they got destroyed, absolutely destroyed. And now we've stopped again, but we haven't started to collapse. Maybe we do. I don't know. I don't think so based on what I'm looking at. But again, we're into this stop area of the market. Maybe we start to go again. And I pointed that out with the average true range. So taking a step back to the last couple of videos where this basically drops off and we get into some low point on the average true range. So the bars really do die off. Like we saw on Saturday, there was only a few $100 on that daily bar. And then when people aren't watching, Bitcoin takes off. They all try to chase their tail. And generally, they do that at the peak. And then you see it stop again, correct. And then it starts again without them on board. And I think that'll happen again, as it has done throughout history on basically every single market. When people aren't ready for it, that's when it basically starts going. And it looks like we're getting into one of those positions now. The Google Trends is now at its lowest level since October of 2023. Sorry, it took me a while to say that. Here we are, October 2023 was at 18. Now this is all relative. It goes from 0 to 100, and it's relative to the highest time that Bitcoin was searched. So the highest volume of Bitcoin search history in the last 5 years, and that was in 2021. We're now at 17. And the last time we were under 17, or at least for this longer period here, was in October 2023, when things were very, very quiet. That is here, October 2023 at the breakout, that September low, before a major pump. Does that mean we pump this month? Let's wait and see. But at least if you're positioned to be on the right side of the market when that happens, and you've got some entry signals, maybe using your Gann swing indicator when the swings break, then I think you're going to be pretty excited by that, rather than chasing your tail as the market heads up, thinking that it might go lower. So we're at 17, that price was 18, and through this period, as it was tracking down through August and September, it hit 17, 16, 15, and stayed around there for about 2 months. So I've got that in the back of my mind for 2 months, because that was also part of my theory as we're at these tops. After a 6-month move, how long does the market typically correct for, or at least stay in a trading range? And that trading range could go slightly higher than where that current price is, but essentially remain in a trading range. The price targets, as we've covered on the macro, haven't changed, and we're looking at $81,000. This is the 50% level, and then the next levels are in the 130s to 150s. Now I'm using the fib retracement tool from the lows to the highs. I've gone into great detail with this on the channel, so make sure you are subscribed to the channel rather than me go through it again in every video and make them an hour long. Just understand that we're using the entire bull market ranges, and then also an extension tool and the retracement tool. So the extension tool gives us our first price resistance at around 80 to 81,000. And then some other targets above using the 50% or the 150 and the 200% range are between 100 and 150, with an emphasis on the price cluster at around 130 and 150. So a couple of price clusters coming in there. Let's see how the market responds first to 81 as the first price target, and then in those 130 to 150. And of course, video is not complete without talking about the psychological level at 100. So they're my 3 significant levels: 80, 100, and then this range here, 130 to 150. I'll call it 4 levels if you wish. In this series in future videos, but I'll see you back here at the next one very soon. Till then, take care and peace out.